Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2015 surrealist dark comedy drama, The Lobster. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I would like to give a special shout out to Leon for requesting this review, and if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Lobster is one of those films that saw the trailer for it around the time when it was about ready to come out in 2016. Didn't look like my kind of film, and just skipped it. And didn't really watch it until recently. And after seeing the film all the way through, yeah, this is not my cup of tea. This is not really a film for me. I know there's a lot of people who like the film. They find it profound, or they find it endearingly quirky. I just thought it was mostly boring and pretty frustrating because of just how muddled the script was for me personally. I know for a lot of people, a lot of critics, they thought it was great. Teach their own. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think this film is completely worthless, but I do feel that it's not anywhere near as good as its reputation critically might suggest. It's another one of those A24 indie films for the Arthouse crowd that has some sort of commentary on society, has some nice, pretty pictures when it comes to the cinematography and direction, but to me is pretty shallow and empty when it comes to key elements of an effective film, let alone an effective story. It's directed by Yorgos on Lanthimos, and the direction in this film is actually pretty solid. I think it's a nice looking movie. It's the kind of film that has some very strong shot selection. It's a movie that has a nice variety of different kinds of shots. There's some great establishing shots. There's some other instances where the direction really shines. Yorgos definitely does show that he's a very talented filmmaker. And knows his way around a camera and then some. I just wish that his beautiful shots were featured in a film that I liked a hell of a lot more than I did this. It's one of those movies where the visuals are honestly let down by some very integral parts of the overall film. And I know for some people, they can just overlook that because I know that there are people out there who, as long as the film looks good, has some good direction, good cinematography, because they view film as strictly a visual medium and quality storytelling and quality characterization isn't necessarily paramount to them, then this is the kind of film that works for them because it has a certain vibe, has a certain aesthetic, and so it works for them on that level. To me, I can't view cinema that way. That's not how I absorb cinema. That's not how I personally enjoy cinema. Cinema to me is something that's a very immersive experience that combines both the visual medium as well as the written medium. So the two combine together to create something that is genuinely special or genuinely terrible if things were not handled properly, to say the least, when it comes to aspects of the overall film. This at least isn't something that looks terrible and also has a script that I don't like. So I will give the film that. But yeah, the screenplay is by F. Themis, Filippou, and Yorgos. And, you know, it's a very, very strong, 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 very I know that this script has gotten a lot of praise for its social commentary and its subtext about coupling and about societal pressures when it comes to forcing people to be with a partner, and the societal ostracizing that happens if you choose to be alone and you choose to be a loner instead of choosing to be a partner with somebody. And I know that there's definitely a lot of analogies when it comes to coupling and the animal kingdom and so on and so forth. I get what the writers are trying to do with the subtext and the social commentary. The reason why I didn't get into this film, the reason why I honestly don't like this movie, doesn't necessarily have to do with me not getting it. I got it. I just was not that invested in the story, and I wasn't that invested in the characters. And that really comes down to how the screenwriters handled things. To me personally, this script, it just comes across more like the ramblings of two guys high on pot. They got some good weed and smoked it one night. They smoked a bowl together, and then they thought about society, and they thought about relationships, and then animals came up, and then they decided just to combine all that together and write a script. That's honestly how this screenplay comes across to me. And that explains why it's so unfocused. That explains why it's so muddled. That explains why it's not as fleshed out and as well thought out as it could be, because it's just two writers who were just smoking some bud and one night and just wrote their ideas down and then decided later on to turn that into a screenplay. I know it's supposed to be a black comedy, but it wasn't funny for me personally. I know for some people it's hilarious. They think it is absolutely uproariously funny. I didn't laugh once. And I like black comedies. Maybe it's because I'm not a big fan of surrealist, absurdist humor. That's one of my least favorite kinds of comedy. So maybe that's it. But honestly, I think I could still laugh at least once or twice. I'm not a huge, big fan of that kind of comedy, but if it's done well and done right, I can still find it funny. I don't know where the humor is supposed to come from with this screenplay. The dialogue, is that where it's supposed to come from? Where half the time it sounds like it's dialogue from Simple Jack. The hit movie makes my eyes rain. Like, is it supposed to be that? If that's the case, it doesn't work because they do it too much, and it's so on the nose and so clearly, obviously absurd that it doesn't have any ounce of satire in it, like Simple Jack, where it was satirizing Oscar bait screenplays. So it doesn't work on that in that regard. And if it's supposed to be taken seriously, it completely totally fails because you can't take most of this dialogue seriously. And the entire plot, which involves some distant future where people go to this hotel and they willingly join this competition where they have to find a mate within a certain amount of time, otherwise they will be turned into animals. It's an animal of their choice, but they still get turned into animals. Okay, you get turned into animals if you don't find somebody that you want to, I guess, be with for the rest of your life. You don't want somebody you don't want to marry. And there's also some stuff where if you're having problems, they'll bring in a kid. So a kid will be brought in to help you out a little bit. And I'm like, okay. So they're bringing a kid to help you out in terms of keeping this mate that you've decided to pick. And then there's like this finalization process or something. It's like it's a whole competition basically. And then there's these other people that are also involved who are trying to hunt other people, but that's never really that cohesive or that clear. And there's a bunch of different characters who are going to this hotel, and it's one of those screenplays where you get next to no depth to these characters. You don't know who they are. You just know vague little semblances of who they are supposed to be. And as a result, there's no real connection to anyone. There's no real connection to any characters. You don't really necessarily uh, despise or have any real disdain for anyone, but you also don't really have any real sense of uh hey, this is a character that I care about, that I want to have a happy ending, or I want to be with this particular person. Except a little bit later on with David and the short sighted woman. I will say that once those two started to elope, then I actually started to feel something, but the script still doesn't do as much with that as I think it could have. Honestly, I think too much of this script is just focused on this absurdist idea about people going to this hotel, getting involved in a competition, and it's all about finding a mate. And if you don't find the right mate at a certain amount of time, you get turned into an animal. And trying to make that into a comedy, but they don't really do much with that whole animal thing except weak sight gags. Oh, hey, there's that girl with the blonde hair. Now she's a pony with a blonde mane. Get it? Oh, hey, later on in the film, there's like a flamingo and a camel in the woods. They used to be people. Oh, hey, David's brother is a dog. All right, okay. Yeah. Where are we going? Are we going anywhere with this other than just people turn into animals? They don't find somebody that uh I guess this society deems acceptable for them to be mated with. All right. But then there's this whole loner culture thing with these people who live in the woods and they have their own rules. And once David finds a way to escape from the hotel after he tries to uh, force a mate with this heartless woman who is really just a psychopath, and it doesn't work, and she's going to turn him in, but then he takes her out, and there's a maid that just inexplicably decides to help him, which you find out later this maid works for the loners, but it still doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense that she would help him, especially if it could blow her cover. And he then goes and lives in the woods of the loners, and he starts to form a relationship with this woman, the short-sighted woman, who also starts narrating the film at some point, long before she even appears in the story. So that's just another thing that just completely alienates you as an audience member, which I've heard that's the intent. To me, that's a mistake. I know for some people, they love that. They want to feel alienated. They like it when a film takes them so far out of their comfort zone. And I think in some ways that can work, but it works in doses. An entire film that's just completely alienating and doesn't really have much in regards of a real human connection, that doesn't work for me. It just becomes so alienating and so distant that I do not care. And it just becomes boring. And that's what happened with this script. It became very boring really fast. And because I lost interest in it really quick, because I don't have any genuine connection with the characters, let alone with what's happening. It also doesn't really provide a clear idea of this world or this competition. It just says, oh, this is what happens. These are some of the rules. Some of these rules are going to be abided by. Some of them aren't. But yeah, make with it what you will. I'm like, okay, you could have put a little more effort into making this whole future feel more like fleshed out, more clarified thing instead of just vague ideas and vague concepts. It also affects the way that the antagonists are written because they don't ever feel like a threat, because either they're too easy to dupe, too easy to take out. For instance, the Heartless Woman was set up as being this really good hunter who took out like 100 different guys, but you never see her do any of that. And the one time you see her try to target David, she gets easily outsmarted and easily taken out. So it's like, okay, she's supposed to be this really good hunter, but she doesn't ever show it on screen because the script never shows that. It just says that she is. You have other stuff set up with this society where you are watched by certain authority figures, and if they think you're something you're not, they'll come in and they'll ask you questions or they'll ask for identification. But the one moment you see that happen, the police or whatever, they are so easily outwitted that it's not even funny. All that it takes is just for David to be considered a worthy part of this society, or a member of this city, or a married man, is for another woman to show up and just say that, oh hey, I bought some of your pain cream, and just talk to him. And then the police are like, yeah, nah, you don't have to show us any papers, move along. I'm like, what? Like, really? It's that easy? If it's that easy, why does anyone go through all this shit in the first place with this stuff in the hotel? And why do they have to? That's never explained. It's never explained why they have to do this. It's just something that they do. Because the whole stuff with the loner thing and living in the city, it seems like it's really easy to just fake it. Fake it till you make it. And because of that, it makes it so much more frustrating that David and the short-sighted woman take so long to try to leave the woods and go to the city on their own. So long to the point where they get caught, and then the short-sighted woman becomes blind, and David, I guess his punishment is nothing. That's the other thing. It's like the loners also have inconsistent issues when it comes to the antagonists in that group. Oh, we'll punish the girl. We'll punish the short-sighted woman by making her blind, but we'll just let David just do whatever. We'll make him dig his own grave and sit in it for a little bit. But other than that, nothing. No punishment. Like, what? What is up with this script? It's such a mess. So muddled. And if you think the ending is going to be any better and it's going to clear things up, it's not. It's just another one of those endings where the film doesn't end. It gets to the point where the short-sighted woman and David still go out on their own to the city. They make it to the city. They're in a diner, and David is about ready to blind himself with a steak knife, because in this society, if you have similar physical traits, then you're a match. You're a more likely match. Like if you have nosebleeds, then if somebody else has nosebleeds, then you're a good match. So if you're blind, then the other person is blind, then you're a match. But what if somebody purposely blinds themselves? Wouldn't that be a problem? If they blind themselves with a steak knife in front of witnesses, wouldn't that undermine that? Wouldn't that make it so that's not really a real physical trait, and it's something that you did yourself? So why would that count? Since it seems to be a lot about genetic stuff, and also this whole thing where if you fake certain things, like this one guy is doing, who's on the yacht earlier on in the movie before the ending, and he's got a girl and a daughter, and he's faking his nosebleeds. But I guess it's a problem when he does it, but then there's nothing that's ever really done about that either. It's not like he's exposed and punished for that. And so uh, David just decides to stab his eyes out. You never see David and the short-sighted woman outside the diner. You don't see what happens to them after that. So the movie just decides to stop at that point, because it leaves things up to interpretation. You can interpret the ending how you will. And I'm like, okay, all right, cool. To me, that's lazy. For some people, that's brilliant writing. To me, it's lazy writing because you could not come up with an ending, so you leave it up to the audience to end the film for you. I'm not going to do that. Write an ending. What the fuck is this? So it doesn't have a satisfying conclusion. It's not satisfying in general because it's a dark comedy that's not funny. It's a romance that's, I guess, serviceable at best. I like the bit where they are communicating with one another. David and the short-sighted woman with sign language. Forgive me there. I got a little discombobulated just because I was just thinking about all the frustrating things about this script that either don't fit or don't work or don't live up to their full potential. This entire screenplay is not only essentially pot-addled ranting, but it's also, in essence, just a Black Mirror episode that stretched way past its limits, and a rather weak and forgettable one. But that's just my take on it. Because it doesn't even do as much as it could with the whole animal thing. That's a good opportunity for some body horror. You don't even go that route. You just see animals. And you're like, okay, that was a human at one point. All right. You don't even do anything with that. So you could have done more with that. Don't do more with that. Could have done a lot more with the satirical elements. Don't really do a lot with that either. There's a couple moments that I guess I think they're supposed to be funny, like the scene where all the loners are dancing alone in the woods. But to me, it's just weird. There's just a lot of that stuff in this script where it's like, I think it's supposed to be funny, and I think it's supposed to be funny because it's weird. It's supposed to be funny because people are talking about fucking each other in the ass, or they're talking about fucking, or they're doing all of this, and I'm like, or they're saying these lines of dialogue in a weird way, and that just isn't funny to me. It might be funny to other people, but it's not for me. So it's not a good comedy. It's not a good story because it meanders and it's all over the place. I really think it should have just focused on David and the short-sighted woman. Establish the short-sighted woman as one of the people that's going to the hotel, and they exchange glances maybe once or twice. It seems like there might be a connection, but they don't quite notice it yet because they're focused on other things and trying to survive and not be turned into an animal. So they're not necessarily going to go for their first instinct. So they decide to go a different route, and then you have their attempts to try to find a mate go awry at the same time. So that leads to them going on the run and going to the woods, and then they elope, and then they become lovers, and then they run away to the city, and then they're being chased, and then they have to try to stay one step ahead of the authority figures in this society. And will they be able to do that? Will they be able to live together and love one another and live this lie and so on and so forth? Or maybe they band together with the loners and they decide to take the hotel. Like, there is like a bit there where it seems like they're going to take the hotel, but the script does nothing with that. There's this whole scene with the hotel managers, and they give him a gun. He's willing to shoot the other hotel ramp manager, and then it just cuts away. You don't see anything. And I'm like, okay, it looked like they were going to siege the hotel, maybe like free the people, destroy the transformation room. No, nothing ever happens to that with that whole bit. It's pointless. That's another problem with the script. There's so many moments in the script where nothing happens. Nothing of substance, nothing of, in my opinion, that much intrigue. There's opportunities to be intriguing, but it doesn't take advantage of them. Like I said, it is at best a pretty average, forgettable episode of Black Mirror. But now it's extended to 2 hours. And it just can't handle that because there's not enough there in the script. At least not to me. I'm sorry, social commentary and subtext by itself, no matter how abundant it is, does not make up for weak storytelling and weak characterization. It doesn't. And if you're going to tell me, oh, the characters are supposed to be this way because they're supposed to be more animalistic, that doesn't really make a difference to me. Because it still makes the dialogue bad. It still causes integral issues with the overall script and the overall story. Even if that is the intent, it still doesn't work. To me, it's just something that does not work for me personally, no matter what the intent is. And I feel bad for the cast, too, because this script, who the hell is going to make some of this dialogue work? Who the hell is going to make this whole just unfocused smattering of ideas and concepts? I don't care how good of an actor or an actress you are. You're not going to elevate this. You're not going to make this work consistently. And that's what happens. Like, even Rachel Weisz isn't even able to deliver consistently good narration. There are times where it sounds like she doesn't want to be there and is just completely dead inside. The Colin Farrell, Leia Seydoux, Ariane Lebed, Ben Whishaw, Angeliki Papoulia, excuse me, John C. Reilly, Jessica Barden, Olivia Colman, like all of these performers. Excuse me, sorry, apparently my voice wants to quit. My voice wants to quit on this movie. It's like my body just doesn't. My body just wants to stop talking about The Lobster. But yeah, all these talented cast members. There's not a lot they can do with these characters. They aren't characters. There's not a lot for them to sink their teeth into, let alone deliver compelling, memorable performances. And the characters that have the most screen time, the actors that play them, they aren't really given the best opportunity to shine either, because they're given so much dumb, silly, simple Jack from Tropic Thunder kind of dialogue. And that doesn't work either. And I don't like this trend with these indie films where you have this kind of dialogue and you have these performances where these actors and actresses act like they were replaced by body snatcher doubles who are just now trying to learn how to act. I don't like that at all. To me, it's not funny. And if it's supposed to be funny and humorous, it just comes across like try-hard bullshit. You know, they're trying to act badly. And that doesn't work. That's not effective at all. And the film is pretty good technically. I mean, it's got good cinematography by Themios Bakatakis. It's edited well by Yorgos Mavro Pisardis. It is. It's got some good cinematography and some good editing. Like a good chunk of these A24 Arthouse indie films do. Technically, they're tremendous. Screenplay-wise, not so much. Characters, you aren't going to find good characters here. And that just makes it such a tedious slog to sit through. It's 118 minutes, and it feels like 218 because the screenplay is unfocused and weak, and the characters are not strong. They don't necessarily have to be likable. They just need to be compelling. There needs to be something about them other than some weird little quirks or a few things here and there that makes me care about what happens to them in the end. And this film fails to do that. And as a result, it just fails to get me invested. And it fails to really get me to get immersed in the story. It's just one of those movies that at the end of the day, I definitely did not care for. Would I say that I absolutely hated it? Probably not. I've seen worse films than this because at least it's technically good. It looks good. It's got good cinematography. It's well edited. Some of the cast members, they are trying, but there's only so much they can do considering what they were given to work with, specifically Colin, Farrell, and Rachel Weisz. Um, but it's just one of those films that at the end of the day, I personally didn't feel it worked. But I do appreciate the fact that it tried to do something different in the end. It tried to be unique, tried to be its own thing. It wasn't another remake, reboot, or sequel or anything like that. I do appreciate that about the film. And, you know, it's an acquired taste. Some people have developed a taste for this, just like some people don't like lobster. And you know what? I've never been a huge fan of lobster either. So it's kind of fitting that I'm not a big fan of the lobster, just like I'm not really a big fan of the shellfish. Like I've always felt the shellfish was kind of overrated. I've even gone to good lobster places, and I'm just like, eh. So that's kind of how I feel about the movie too. But anyway, I don't really think any amount of butter or spices or anything can really save this film uh, from its issues. Um, but that's just my opinion. That's just my take on the film. Um, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.